Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So I would like to begin by expressing gratitude to the Buddhas and the ancestors and to my teacher for allowing me this opportunity. And thank you all for being here, for being with me to help me work myself out like you always are. I'm going to begin with a quote from Dogen. Just as Zazen is not waiting for enlightenment, expounding the Dharma, the expression of awareness, does not wait only for enlightenment's aftermath. There is no practice enlightenment that is not expressed. There is no practice expression of Buddha Dharma that is not informed with enlightenment. There is no enlightenment expression unless it is practiced. Now, as I sit here before you, I want to emphasize that I am practicing. I am practicing in a very fundamental way, and by fundamental, I mean basic. For example, if I was learning how to play basketball for the first time, I would be practicing the fundamentals of dribbling and shooting. Now, the working title for this talk was How Genjokoan Speaks to the Practice of Zazen. But as I began to write it, it didn't fit right. It didn't feel right. So I switched it to How Zazen Illuminates the Understanding of Genjokoan. And this felt a little more accessible to me. So, now, I believe in many respects that Genjokoan is a call to faith. Allow me to explain. Last Wednesday, we had Shosan ceremony, and there were two questions that were asked and answered that I would briefly like to discuss. The first question was, Dogen says we must penetrate the great matter of birth and death. What is the meaning of penetrate? And the answer given by the teacher was a gesture. The second question was, what is faith? And the reply was, your deepest self. And the way that I took these, the way that I interpreted both of these answers was that they were both expressions of faith. So deepest self and are both equally expressions of faith. Or to put it differently, they are equal with respect to their source, as both come from the same place. Now, I suppose it would help to give a definition of faith, but faith, as I am attempting to articulate it, is not susceptible to logic as we understand logic. In a certain regard, faith is beyond logic. Now, I know we have been reading Okumura Roshi's commentary on Genjokoan, but I would like to use Hakuin Yasutani's book and commentary on Genjokoan, Flowers Fall, to help flesh out this idea of the equality of faith with our deepest self and so. Now it's a bit long, so bear with me. So this is from the section, What is Shobogenzo? Shobogenzo, or the treasury of the true Dharma I, is the Buddha way. True Dharma is not a relative thing opposed to false Dharma. It is on a different level from the childish words used by some sectarian groups, like when kids squabbling, they establish true and false for their own purposes and say things like, our way is the only true Dharma and the others are false Dharmas. The whole universe is just this true Dharma without a speck of me. Further, here for the sake of beginners, I'll separate the two words true and Dharma and explain them in a manner that is easy to understand. True is the world of absolute equality. Dharma is the world of absolute differences. Now I want to repeat those sentences because now I'm going to use faith for true and deepest self, and by implication, that gesture for Dharma. And they would read, faith is the world of absolute equality. Deepest self is the world of absolute differences. Please appreciate the effect of this word absolute. It is not simply speaking more emphatically. Absolute means the whole universe is nothing but equality. The whole universe is nothing but differentiation. Therefore, equality and differences are always of the same value. Or rather than of the same value, they are the same thing. We can't even call them the two faces of the same thing. When one says equality, equality completely swallows up differences. It's not rejecting differences, and differences have no place to show their face. That's what is called absolute equality. Likewise, when one says difference, differences completely swallow up equality. They're not ignoring equality, and equality has no place to show its face. This is what is called absolute differences. Thus, although the language is the same, the words equality and differences as they are used in the Buddha Dharma have a completely different meaning from the way they are ordinarily used. To exhaust the essentials of the Buddha Dharma in a phrase, it's Buddha nature / equality, cause and effect / differences. To say it more simply, it's emptiness, causes and conditions. Emptiness is equality, causes and conditions are differences. In the Buddha Dharma, the word equality means emptiness. In the Buddha Dharma, the word difference means form, that which has characteristics. Now, the other thing I want to say is that when I say deep, and this is why I'm using deepest self as a Dharma, is because deepest is a characteristic of self, as is the gesture is also a characteristic of self. In the Soto sect, these are called respectively the absolute position and the relative position. If we reduce the two words true Dharma to the level of conceptual thought and explain them, true Dharma means emptiness, in this case faith, causes and conditions, deepest self. Now I want to turn to Dogen and speak or read a little bit about what he says about faith. And this is from Mystical Realist by Hee-Jin Kim. Kim says, for Dogen, faith lay in original enlightenment, and enlightenment came from original faith. Dogen writes, it is imperative for those who practice the way to believe in it. Those who have faith in the way should know for certain they are unfailingly in the way from the very beginning, and are thus free from confusions, delusions, and disarray, as well as from additions, subtractions, and errors. Believing in this manner and penetrating the way thusly, practice it accordingly. Such is fundamental to learning the way. He continues, and this is what I want to emphasize: faith is so called when the entire body becomes faith. Faith is one with the fruit of enlightenment. The fruit of enlightenment is one with faith. If it is not the fruit of enlightenment, faith is not realized. So now we come to the practice of Zazen and the pursuit of Genjokoan as a call to faith. Okamura defines Gen as to show up, or to be in the present moment. Jo means to become or to accomplish. And Koan expresses the reality of our daily lives. So Zazen is the art and practice of showing up on the cushion to become and to express the reality that we always already are. And wherever we might be in our practice with regard to faith, whatever we feel or think faith to be, that is where we begin. We find the thread of faith that is our body and flows through our body, and we follow it to the best of our abilities. For us as Zen practitioners, we find this thread when we sit Zazen. Here the thread of faith becomes self-evident in the upright posture. Here we glean the thread as ourselves, carrying ourselves forward on waves of delusion. And when we persist, when we persevere, we glean the waves of delusion as arising from a sea of absolute faith. I am grateful for my delusions, for they have brought me back time and time again to the cushion. Now, I would like to finish by going back to Flowers Fall and some practical considerations. As I am coming to understand, Dogen was deeply pragmatic in his writings and teaching. His deep concern was, how do we awaken? What is this process? And how do we apply it moment by moment in our daily existence? So in chapter 1, we read briefly, when all dharmas are the Buddha Dharma, there are delusion and enlightenment, practice, birth, death, Buddhas, and sentient beings. When the myriad dharmas are without a self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddhas, no sentient beings, no birth, no death. Now, Yasutani says that when all dharmas are the Buddha Dharma is the relative position, i.e., deepest self, and when the myriad dharmas are without a self, that is the absolute position, faith. And he says, when all dharmas are the Buddha Dharma, and when myriad dharmas are without a self, confront each other, and it's this confront that I want to speak to briefly. Because the relative and the absolute are always confronting each other. There is no time when they don't. And the practical consideration is this: how we confront each other, how we meet one another matters. If we can meet each other appropriately, with an open mind and compassion in our hearts, if we can do this faithfully, then for the moment we see the way more clearly. And the mystery of faith, which is in us and all around us, reveals itself as our deepest self. This is the call of Genjokoan. Thank you. Suppose we have a bit of time if there are questions. Yes.
Would you expand on your gratitude for your delusions bringing you back to the question?
Yeah, I think for me, it has always been, oh, I'm going to get enlightened by sitting on the cushion. Doing Zazen, I'm going to awaken. And that's delusion. You're already awake.
Is that enough, or must it be realized?
It must be realized. Is there any questions from Zoomland? Okay.
I think you've had a question.
It's trying. When things are utterly broken, what do you say?
Keep sitting.
Not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes impossible.
What's impossible?
Sometimes.
Is there broken Zazen?
There must be. I'm doing it.
Not in faith.
Is there anything outside of faith?
There is nothing outside of faith.